Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we have with us Brother Stan Bunch. He's the promotional director for the state of Missouri, and he and his state have been very active in many different endeavors. But today we're going to talk to him about the importance of Presbytery boards, because they've done some good work in Missouri about that. So first of all, thank you so much, Pastor Bunch, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Brother Eddie, for the opportunity. I consider it an honor to be able to share with you.
So we should let our listeners know, yes, you work there in the state of Missouri, but you've also had experience as a missionary in Panama. So you've been very involved in the leadership and the development of church leaders and pastors, haven't you?
Very much so. Started pastoring in 1980 here in Missouri for about 3.5 years, and then in 1985 started language school. After language school, we went to the country of Panama and spent the next 27, almost 28 years ministering there. 2012, we came back to the U.S. and began working here in the state of Missouri as the state director.
Wow.
It's been very blessed ministry.
So it seems like it may seem like it was just yesterday. It may not, but you've been working, especially in this current position, for quite a while. I didn't realize it had been that long. That's all right.
Been 12 years, almost 13.
It's great. Well, you all have done a lot of work, and people can see that at your website, the work on your Constitution and various documents. But today I want to talk to you about some of the work you all have done with your Presbytery boards. And many of our listeners are probably aware of some of the research the Committee for Denominational Research did. And one of the studies they did was they looked at Presbytery boards, and you all have tried to kind of help your churches, help your associations do this very effectively. So how about sharing a bit about what's happening in Missouri and what Presbytery boards do and why it's so important that we do our jobs well?
I guess something that got me thinking on this, coming out of Panama, we had a pretty involved process for ordination there, as far as preparation and the questionnaire, and then the accountability among the ministers was a big thing. And something that really got my attention was in one particular quarterly meeting that I was in here in Missouri, the ordination committee was meeting and to examine a candidate, and about 20 minutes later they came back and recommended this candidate for ordination, and that was the first and only meeting that they had had with him. And so it was, and ironically, that minister is no longer in any ministry that I'm aware of, but that caused me to think that we really need to streamline some things, and our right hand needs to know what our left hand is doing. And so across the state, we found that we've got some Presbytery boards that are doing a very good job. They have really good questionnaires. They have a good process that they're taking them through. But then we've got others, like the one I just mentioned, that are somewhat deficient. And so what we were trying to do was come up with a uniform process that each association could adapt to what they're already doing, with the intention of not necessarily spelling out or asking them to follow the procedure that we were outlining, but rather giving them some suggestions and some tools and some understanding of why it would be good to have a process that all of our associations could follow to some degree. In that way, if a minister were to leave an association on the east side of the state and go to the west side of the state, then that association or that church would have the assurance that that brother had been through a somewhat standard procedure for ordination and had met a certain criteria of expectations in the association from which he has come. So we wanted a common process. Interestingly, when I read some things in preparation for another study that I was doing in the beginning of associations, one of the things that Benjamin Randall and others wanted was some type of a common tribunal to help to settle doctrinal questions and to help in the process of ordination and examination, et cetera, et cetera. They wanted to have a common process among their churches. And so we found that to some degree we had gotten away from that. So in the manual that we've got, which we can make available to any of our pastors, ordination committees out there, we go through the rationale of ordination, the benefits of ordination, the scriptural basis for that, the who has the authority to ordain, the procedure, the preparation for ordination, what's the process for if the ordination or the person needs to have their credentials revoked, what's that process, the transfer of credentials from one association to the other, letters of recommendation, there's a profile that they can fill out to let people know who they are, the ordaining council know a little bit about them. There's an application if they want to get licensure, if they want to go on for ordination, and then some suggested study books, procedure, colleges, and things like that. A sample questionnaire for associations to ask for the candidate, and then some basic suggestions or counsel to ordination committees. And so we had across the state several men who had input in this. There was a committee that worked on this, and it was well accepted. And in our state meeting in 2023, it was adopted, and we've made it available to all of our associations. And I think most have found it to be pretty helpful.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So our listeners are thinking, wow, it sounds like it's pretty involved. However, what you're trying to do is make sure that only men that are really called to preach are preaching. And you're also, it's a good help to them to know. You mentioned the fellow that was only examined for like 20 minutes and he's no longer in the ministry, that as far as you can tell, it helps them to know what you're about to do it's a big deal, right? And so it's important for them. It's important for the church. It's important for the people they will minister, that you've got a rigorous type of undertaking to make sure men are prepared to preach.
Oh, absolutely. And we're not wanting to put roadblocks in the way of anyone, but at the same time, we take it seriously. The procedure and the laying on of hands and ordaining an individual, and so and across the state and across the denomination, our people take this seriously. But I think what we found is that in some cases we just didn't have the tools in our hands to go through this procedure in an organized manner. And so we've tried to lay it out in such a way that would give those who maybe weren't clear on the procedure, the expectations, the questions to ask, would have something in their hands that would make it a little bit more easier for them as they go through that.
That's good. So a lot of these happen Friday night, Saturday morning. Guys are bivocational, and so it really does help to have a process that we all know what we're doing, is I think what I'm hearing you saying. So
exactly. One of the things that I've heard several times, because of our similarity between us and the Nazarene church, the Nazarenes, from what I've gathered, require a 4-year degree for ordination. And some have asked, why don't we, and these are fellows who don't have a 4-year degree, are asking, why don't we require that? Because they see the need for further preparation, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's some understandings that are out there that are traditional, and they become the rule of law that are not necessarily, probably shouldn't be given the amount of authority that they have. And that is that you're going to be licensed for 1 year, and after that year, then you can go ahead and be on the second year, we can ordain you. Well, why do we say that a person is only licensed for 1 year? Maybe they need to carry a license for 3 years or 4 years while they're getting preparation, or just because a person may become a pastor of a church, what is the necessity that they be ordained immediately within the first year? And so some of these questions we're asking, couldn't the local pastor be licensed while he's getting his preparation and things like that? But again, we've been down that procedure for so long that it just becomes, that's just the way that we do things. And it's not necessarily biblical, but it's not unbiblical, but it may not be the best way, and we can improve upon
it. And so I think what we're asking Presbytery boards is to think of their kind of like their function, and you know what, you have the freedom to kind of look and say, hey, does this person, what is it that would help this person to really be effective? And so you're saying if it means that they're licensed for more than 1 year, so be it, and
Right.
Don't worry so much. What I like a lot of what you've done to try to make things easier for Presbytery boards as we think about how busy people are and all that's involved. And so one thing I'll go ahead and say, if you're listening, you're like, hey, I'd like to learn more about this, go to NAFWB.org. They, first of all, can see the study that the Committee for Denominational Research completed, and you can see what they found as far as Presbytery boards across the denomination. And one thing that's helpful about that particular site, associations sent us and states sent us the questionnaires that they use. They sent the procedures that they use. Your manual is there. And so there's no reason for folks to reinvent the wheel. They can take that and they can utilize that. You mentioned preparation. We encourage folks to go and Presbytery boards to utilize our colleges. We also encourage them to read or use that D6 family book list, which is there too. And so talk about some of the things that a candidate for licensure and then a candidate for ordination, what kinds of books and knowledge that they would need to have.
The list of books that we have covers quite an array of different topics. Doctrine, O'Donnell's book on doctrine, Quest for Truth by Leroy Forlines, Free Will Baptist History by Dr. Pick, Spiritual Disciplines by Donald Whitney, Preaching That Changes Lives, Michael, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Faberes.
I think so.
Gordon Fee's book, Reading the Bible for All It's Worth. And then books on pastoral care, on leadership, administration, and then also encouraging them to take advantage of what Welch College offers, Randall University offers, Church Answers University, online courses. There's really, that I can see, there's really in our denomination with scholarships and everything that we've got available, there's really no excuse for our ministers to be unprepared to enter the ministry, theologically speaking.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot to know, but it's also, it helps them sharpen that tool, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And also, one of the things that we found is that a number of our ministers, and many who've been in the ministry for several years, really weren't aware of what we were doing as a state association. And so we came up with the handbook, state handbook, that we put in the hands of anybody that wants it, layman, and it explains all of our state boards, the ministries that we have in the state, the national ministries, explains basically what's going on among Free Will Baptist in Missouri and around the world, to give them just sort of a bird's eye view of who we are, to educate and to inform our ministers and give them, because I think the more that they're informed, the more buy-in, so to speak, we're going to have more identity that we'll have with them. Now, I will hasten to say, we understand that these documents, both of these, as others, are going to need to be updated and revised periodically because of things that will change. But something that we're trying to accomplish is to up the bar just a little bit when it comes to, as Rayner would say, minimal viable expectations. As a minister, you expect us to extend to you an ordination certificate. So therefore, we're expecting from you certain things as well. And we're not going to expect the moon from you, but we do have some minimal expectations that are reasonable. And so accountability is a big thing.
And so you talk about, accountability, and we think about Presbytery boards. Really, it may be that their jobs are not really done, or our jobs as working with other pastors are not really done once we become ordained. In other fields, they have continuing education requirements. And so I know in Missouri, for example, you have your Christian education group that meets. You also have you encourage folks to participate in book clubs. It seems like there's a couple of those a year. Talk to us a bit about how a pastor, yes, once they become ordained, can continue to educate themselves, which helps them and helps other pastors as well.
Every year at our ministers' retreat, we give away hundreds of books every year. This year, everyone that attends our ministers' retreat is going to receive Piccarilli's book, Teacher, Leader, Shepherd. Bought a big box full of them, and every minister, every pastor that's there will get that book. We give away hundreds and hundreds of books. So one of the ways they can do that is by reading and availing themselves to the resources, written resources that are out there, and there are a lot of them. And we continually try to put books and good reading materials into the hands of our people. And then too, we make retreats available. Our ministers can go for just a portion of what it would cost otherwise to the retreat. And we have seminars at our state meeting. We have seminars. We have at our annual evangelism conference. And so we try to encourage all of our pastors, take advantage of these things. If you don't have children in your church, come to our evangelism conference, and Child Evangelism Fellowship will be there. They'll help you to do that. Mm-hmm. We continually need to be sharpening our tools in order to be more effective. And so we've got some good men here in the state that are they're doing a good job. Like our book club, as you mentioned, our CE board, this year, our retirees, we talked about the importance of being good grandparents, how we can use D6 to help us to be better grandparents, how we can, even as retirees, can be involved in the local church and be effective in a ministry. So constantly putting out to our people opportunities to learn, materials that they can use to learn, and putting we put out a lot of books. I hope that they're reading them because we're investing a pretty good chunk of money in them. But I
So
think it's worth it.
books are very valuable. Podcasts are valuable. Books on tape are valuable. All of those things are important. I noticed that in your backdrop, there's something about Kansas City. Now, it looks like that's the football team you're talking about, but the national is going to be at Kansas City this year, isn't it?
We're looking forward to that. We'll be partnering with the state of Kansas to do sort of a co-state convention. I think it's going to be exciting and encouraging for people to come here in the Midwest, and we will receive them with arms wide open. And if the Chiefs win another Super Bowl, that'd just be exciting on top of that. Hope that doesn't offend anyone.
No, that would be icing on the cake for a few people. So that would be good. So we talked about pastors. Well, we first talked about like candidates for ordination, then we got into pastors, but really this whole thing about continuing to learn, it gets even into lay people, doesn't it? So
absolutely.
You mentioned the national, there's 90 plus workshops. Yes, that's good for pastors, but also for lay people. I think I saw you pretty recently at the leadership conference in Nashville. That again, we think of as pastors, but there's also some lay people there. And I know you've been to the G6 conference and activities at Welch, the Welch Forum, and Randall and Southeastern and so forth. Those are opportunities for pastors and lay people alike to learn. I think we did a boot camp in Missouri, and we encourage people to actually bring their lay people, pastors to bring them too. And really, Brother Stan, local associations, educational opportunities for both pastors and lay people, aren't there?
Oh, yes. You mentioned, and I failed to mention this, the podcast, such as Better Together, the Better Together podcast, and the Rayner podcast, Mark Clifton, Revitalize and Replant. There's a number of really good podcasts when we're driving that we can take advantage of. And most of them are going to be 15, 20 minutes in length, 30 in maximum. And so we can get some good information out of those that spoke at the national. I couldn't be at all the seminars, but I'm listening now to them over the Better Together podcast. And there's really good information there for ministers and laymen to take advantage of.
And then like there's something that's of interest to you, you think it'd be interesting to some of the other folks, maybe forward that on. And we should mention there's the As You Go that the women's ministry puts out, a lot of interesting stories. A lot of people don't get a chance to go, like you mentioned, to the national or miss some of the seminars, listen online. And most of the D6 Family Ministry podcast involve people who've spoken at D6. So that's a way of getting a sense of what that's like. So really, there's a lot of opportunities for whether you're a pastor or whether you're a lay person. There's a lot of educational opportunities that all of us have, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would encourage, I know pastors are really busy. Most of them in Missouri are going to be bivocational. So they come home and they're tired. And so how can we take these little snippets of time that we might have through the day when we're driving or when we're sitting in line to get a meal at the drive-through, to listen to a podcast, to listen to a sermon, or get some instruction in a certain area. And then two, to get together with other believers and spend time talking and praying and communicating. The whole idea behind this manual, the ordination manual, falls right in line with what I suppose we're saying is our national motto, theme, Better Together. There's accountability, there's protection in that. And so I think if we will just clarify what our expectations are. This is our procedure. Make things really, really clear that if we'll work together, we can accomplish a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not the biggest one out there, but we can be effective and we can have an impact.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate you sharing with us today, and I'm excited about what you all are doing in Missouri, and then mentioning basically all of our agencies have something that contributes in some way to people being able to grow more mature, whether it be a pastor or lay person. And so I appreciate you, Brother Stan, for pointing that out and just helping us look at some of the options that all of us have. Thank you for giving us your time today, my friend.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us today as well. Maybe you could encourage someone else to listen to this podcast. Maybe you could share with someone else a book or something about what you picked up in an association meeting or the national or the D6 conference. Remember, every little thing we do, it really does count. It really does make a difference. I want to also encourage you, if you're not giving already through the Cooperative Fund or through the Together Way, to think about doing that. It just so happens Missouri is the #1 supporter of the cooperative program, the Together Way plan, which is where we at the executive office get our funding. So we encourage you to look at what you're personally doing, your church is doing, your state is doing. And remember, whatever you can give, it sure does help us to help pastors and churches. And as Pastor Stan mentioned, if we bring it all together, it helps us accomplish so much more together. So thank you for being with us today, and thank you for what you're doing to give.